I'll address this note later on. Okay. Ms. Bedy, do you recall for verbal let me start it again. Did you call DCF for verbal consent for these photos, or did you have a signed consent for these photos to be taken?
Verbal consent.
And will this be in the medical record for the jury to review?
I think it's in my note, but I'd have to go back and look at my note.
Did these photos ever become part of Maya's medical records?
No.
Who helped you with the second set of photos?
The bedside nurse.
Did you document in her chart the purpose of these photos or the date and time that you completed them?
I'm not sure if I documented them in my chart because these were something that was outside of what we would usually document.
Why would the hospital take a child's first name off the door? Isn't there many children with the first same name?
So I don't know why they pulled all of the nameplates off there, but there are many children with the same first name, but I think usually it was the last name was involved too, and so we wanted to make sure that nobody else was going to attempt to go in the room.
If Maya is using profanity in the hospital, why is it not documented anywhere in her chart?
So the best that I can tell you about that is a lot of times I had teenagers, I had young kids, I had kids from different backgrounds. A lot of times kids use profanity. Unless it was becoming an issue where it was very degradatory, we just gave the kids grace. If it became degradatory or it became that it was very abusive, then we discussed it with the kids and it would have been documented in the chart. We would discuss it with the parents. And it would have been documented in the chart. But it wasn't every day, and this was one time that I remember. I mean, she would get mad at all of us and say things like, she'd just say things, but you give the kid grace. It's a hard situation to be in. I don't want that to follow her forever.
Medical professionals are allowed to put things in quotes, are they not?
Yes.
When you placed Maya on your lap, was there someone in the room to witness this interaction?
There wasn't anyone in the room, but her door was open, and nurses and family members and things like that would walk by during the time that this was going on. So we were always within a sight of people.
Who took the photos when Maya got back from court?
I took those photos.
Was there a second person involved with you taking her returned photos?
Yes, the bedside nurse.
Is that person's name documented?
It would be documented because that person would have done a nursing assessment on her that day.
Prior to October 2016, how much experience did you have with Munchausen's?
That's a good question. So through Suncoast Center, we had a couple of kids that were actually were in foster care because of Munchausen. I had I think 1 or 2 cases before Maya got there, and then afterwards I had a couple of cases. So throughout the years, we don't usually, if you don't work in a pediatric intensive care unit or you're not working in child welfare, you may not see that many cases.
In reference to the code of ethics and you comforting the patient, boundaries, mental harm, you started to state, quote, depends, end quote. Is the jury to take this as the, quote, ethics, end quote, you were to abide to are, in your view, open to your personal interpretation?
So there are guidelines, and with guidelines, they're open to what the situation brings. And many times kids would come up to us for comfort. We might side hug them, we might hold their hand. There were many times that I would be with kids while their procedures were happening, and I would be using skills to help them relax during that time. And I might hold their hand, I might rub their head, I might rub their feet, depending on where they were in the situation. But you weren't doing anything that was invasive. And it certainly didn't happen every day.
During the time of Maya's stay, she testified about being in the hospital chapel. Today, you said that you were never in the All Children's Hospital chapel with Maya. Am I correct in what I heard you say?
So let me clarify. I was in the chapel with Maya and her attorney for a phone call that she did with the court, but Maya and I were never alone in the chapel.
If Maya was transported from her room to the chapel and then back to her room, would there not be, especially during this time, Maya was under a protective order, an entry in the logs of Maya's records of who transported Maya, the time, to where, how long, if that, quote, transport staff, end quote, stayed in the time returning to the patient's assigned room, or is it normal not to document the patient's whereabouts?
So it's kind of, for the kids, always the bedside nurse knew where they are, where they were going. If they were going down to the activity center, or say that they were going down, they were there with a visit and with their parent, and they might be going downstairs. So, but the bedside nurse always knew where that child was.
While Maya and her attorney were in the room talking attorney-client protections, were you located anywhere in proximity, even anywhere in the hall to Maya's room, or were you behind the nurse's station counter?
I was behind the nurse's station. If you're talking about Mr. Zimmerman, I was behind the nurse's station.
In the series of before and after photos we have seen again today, I'd like to confirm, after you seeing them freshly today, in the befores, you do not recall the person that assisted you.
I know it was the bedside nurse, but I didn't know her name.
Okay. In the after photos, you do not recall the person that assisted you.
I don't. I know it was the bedside nurse, but I don't know her name.
In both sets of photos, do you recall the name of the patient you were photographing?
Yes, I do.
You testified much of what you did was at the direction of risk management of Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. During that time, do you know who was on what risk management advisory board or team?
So risk management was a department, and it's whoever was there. I spoke frequently with Patty, but I also spoke with some of the other risk management people during that time too.
Ms. Corrales, do you have any follow-up?
Just briefly. You were asked if you knew the name of the child you were photographing. Who were you photographing?
Maya Kowalski.
With respect to taking photographs, is this the first patient you've had where somebody's been sheltered by DCF?
No.
Is it unusual to take photographs of DCF sheltered children?
Objection. Chapter 39.
I'm going to overrule that one.
So we don't do it often, but sometimes if there's something that we need to document, we go ahead and do it and get it to the CPI or to the DCF people.
Thank you.
That documentation is in the emergency room, is it not?
Objection vague.
Sustained.
The documentation of photographs. with other children? Did you say that it happens with other children?
Yes, it can happen with other children.
Those are in instances where somebody has a cigarette burn on them, or a broken arm, or a cut, or something like that. True?
I can't tell you what the circumstances would be. There's many circumstances.
It's not for a situation like this where there are none of those, is it?
That's not entirely true, no.
All right. Who gave you the verbal consent?
It would have been DCF, Charlotte Laporte.
Okay. Well, did you comply with all of DCF's policies of what you have to do before you take the photos?
Objection, Your Honor. Chapter 39.
He opens it up.
The question's going to ask a different question.
Did you comply with Johns Hopkins policies?
I'd have to look at them all the way to see if we complied with everything.
You could publish it, 2277.
Yeah, we're going to publish. Your Honor, it's in evidence. May we publish it?
If it's in evidence, yes.
2277-281A. I'll direct your attention towards the bottom there of the paragraph where there is a 1, a 2, and a 3. Do you see those?
I do see those.
Well, first, do you agree this is a Johns Hopkins requirement?
I see that it's a Johns Hopkins policy.
All right. Then take a look at 1, 2, and 3. Did you attempt to contact the parents? That's the question. First question is, did you attempt to contact the parents?
I did not. But I did contact DCF.
Did you make any further attempts, or at least document it in the record, that you tried to get a hold of the parents?
I didn't attempt to call the parents.
And did you comply with number 3, the actual contact with the parent's legal guardian, advising the parent's legal guardian of consent and treatment authorized by DCF?
I did contact DCF, who was the legal guardian at the time for the child, yes.
No. There was a guardian ad litem appointed, was there not?
The guardian ad litem doesn't have consent.
Did you document anywhere in the file, if the jury was to look, that you tried to contact the GAL?
I wouldn't have contacted the GAL. The GAL is not the guardian.
And in the records, would you agree, there is no analysis of these photos from a medical standpoint?
I don't know that.
So you knew going in that you were, what reason was it then?
Dr. Danielson asked us to document her skin condition.
And you would do that no matter whether it was allowed or not?
Objection argumentative.
True?
Overruled. She can answer that.
So we did this, or I did this because this was asked of us by Dr. Danielson and it had a good reason for it. If it was not a good reason, I certainly would have been discussing it with the medical team.
Dr. Danielson is not with DCF, is she?
No, she's not.
Charlotte Laporte, did you attempt to get authorization from Charlotte Laporte?
I did get authorization, talked with Charlotte Laporte that day.
You say you did.
Mhm.
So if she testified in this courtroom that you did not, would she be incorrect?
Objection argumentative.
Overruled.
I don't know. I was talking to her that day, and they were doing their own pictures in Sarasota.
So, go ahead.
And I explained to her that we were doing the photos here at the hospital.
Again, I just need to know, is she says in court that you did not seek any permission from her, is she wrong?
I don't know what she said and what she didn't say.
The reason for the cracked door policy involving attorneys is to make sure that if the child falls, that you can yell, that the child can yell and you can hear them, true?
Correct.
Do you really think her attorney wouldn't help her if she did?
I can't speak to
Objection
that.
argumentative.
Well,
Sustained.
would you agree with me there was a person in there?
I can agree with you. Yes, sure.
A person who had ethical duties to her, in fact, as an attorney.
Well, those aren't the same as medical.
Okay? Well, if she were to have a fall, wouldn't there be somebody right there next to her to help?
I can't speak to that. We left the door open. That was part of the policy. When you had a risk for a fall, you left the door open.
I thought you said there was a lot of discretion in how to follow these.
There
Objection,
sometimes.
Your Honor, argumentative.
Okay.
Overruled.
Sometimes there can be some discretion, but this is a big one because if she fell and hit her head or fell and broke something,
If she fell and hit her head or fell and broke something, don't you think her lawyer would come out and let you know?
I can only speak to you that we left the door open.
You left the door open,
Yes,
not
I
to
did.
protect Maya, but so you could hear what was going on in there, didn't you?
Absolutely not, because you can't hear from the nurse's station. There are so many beeps and buzzers and phones going off. You can't hear from the nurse's station into a patient's room.
As to the Nurses Association rules of ethics, whether they are, what did you call them, guidelines or not, you violated them, did you not?
Objection argumentative misstates the guidelines he's referencing to for one, but argumentative.
Sustained.
Regardless of how you designate them, you violated those guidelines, did you not?
Objection argumentative.
Overruled.
No, I did not. I provided comfort to a child who was extremely upset, who was extremely emotional, and who asked for comfort.
Without any authorization from the parents. Why didn't you call the parents?
I'm not sure in that moment that you would stop and call parents. I think you would attend to the child, which
Why not
I
call
did.
them? Why not
Sorry,
call
Your
some?
Honor, can
Sorry,
you not
she can finish.
interrupt? Can you not
Go ahead.
interrupt the witness?
Yeah, please let her finish the answer.
Yes, sir.
I think you would attend to the situation, attend to the child, and try to provide comfort for the child. I certainly would have not walked out on her to then make phone calls.
Well, for her to be so upset that you had to put her on your lap, this had to be going on for a considerable period of time, didn't it?
It happened pretty quickly because once I said to her that she wasn't going to be able to go home for Christmas, tears came. She was very upset.
My point being that she couldn't get that upset if it was quick, and if it was long, you could call the parents.
So it's reasonable to provide comfort to a child, and that's what I did.
On direct examination, you testified that you could tell between the two photographs which bra Maya had on at the time, the training bra or the other bra, correct?
Right.
You can remember that, but you have no memory of who helped you?
Objection, argumentative.
Overruled.
So that was a long time ago, and I don't remember who her nurses were every day and who helped. I'm
Yes, I know, but the point is, how could you remember all the things you described for the jury on direct examination and forget that?
So I knew how that she had changed clothes to go to court, and I knew that she had, when she came back, she had on different clothes. But I don't remember the bedside nurses' names. I'm sorry.
So, if we're correct, and if the jury were to conclude, say, that this was brutal to do what was happening with these photos, you did it to her twice?
Objection, argumentative.
Overruled.
I can't tell you what the jury's going to find or not find. I certainly didn't do anything to try to be brutal. If anything, we tried very hard to be very professional with Maya. I left the room once we were done so that she could change and get ready to go. And once she was done with the nighttime pictures, she and the nurse, I left the room again for her to get changed for night.
And why wasn't there a time stamp on any of these photos?
I don't know that I understand that question.
Do you know what a time stamp is?
Yeah.
It's in the bottom corner
Oh,
of photographs.
Yeah, I can't speak to that. I used the camera that they told me.
If the jury were to go search for those photographs in the medical record, they would not find them, would they?
I don't think so.
Nor would they find any consent in the medical records that you called anyone on behalf of the parents.
Objection, argumentative.
True.
Asked and answered.
Sustained, unasked, answered.
It was as to the medical records.
Asked and answered.
Sustained, unasked, and answered.
And would you agree with me in the photo showing Maya's face that she did not look happy at all, did she?
Asked and answered on his original.
No, I did not.
cross.
Okay, I'm going to overrule that one.
She did not look happy.
She was not happy. Why did you not stop and call the parents?
Objection, asked and answered.
Sustained.
You said you got verbal consent. From whom did you get verbal consent?
Asked and answered.
Sustained.
One moment, Lawrence. Are you aware of the terms of the order on December 27th regarding your involvement in supervision?
Objection, outside the scope of where we are.
Sustained.
Nothing further this time.
Ms. Corrales, anything further?
No, Your Honor.
Members of the jury, anything further from? Please be seated, everybody. Ms. Bedy, in the second photo, the hand in the photo does not match the bedside nurse in the first photo. Whose hand is this?
I'm not sure what photo that they're talking about.
Did you document your conversation with DCF for consent?
I'd have to look at my notes.
Did you document your verbal consent with DCF and have another witness on the phone to witness your verbal consent?
I'd have to look at my notes. I don't think I had anyone else with me.
And next question, will that be documented in the medical records for the jury to review?
I'd have to look at my notes.
Does the hospital use a log to log when children are off the floor to keep track of where the children are when they are off the unit and when they return?
Not that I'm aware of.
Are you testifying you do not know if you documented the photographs in the chart, but the bedside nurse would be documented?
So bedside nurses write a note for every day that they're there with the kids, so that name would be documented in the chart, yes.
Is that where we should look for documentation in the chart?
Yes.
Do you know what Maya changed into to wear to court?
I don't.
The person seen holding Maya's hands in the quote before end quote photos has on all black clothing. Would that be the bedside nurse?
Yes, that would have been the bedside nurse.
Did someone else have to hold her down?
No, nobody held her down.
Would that be documented?
I don't know that it would be documented because nobody needed to hold her down.
What role did Dr. Danielson have in Maya's care?
Dr. Danielson was the attending for the week, so that would be her part in the care.
What kind of device were the pictures taken on?
So this was a long time ago. I think it was on a digital camera.
Will the original file images, including encoded properties, be provided for inspection?
I don't know that.
Would there be an entry placed in writing or typed in the patient's log similar to when a patient is transported to physical therapy or an x-ray?
For what?
Okay, well, I'm going to have to ask the whole thing. Your answer to my question was about the chapel visit, quote, the bedside nurse always knows where the patient is, end quote. That is a response. Would there be an entry placed in writing or typed in the patient's log similar to when a patient is transported to physical therapy or an x-ray?
I don't know what the bedside nurse would log.
In reference to the before and after photos of Maya, you were testifying that those photos were taken with a hospital official camera. Is that correct?
Yes.
And no personal cameras or photos were used. Is that correct?
Yes. No personal cameras were ever used for any of our kids.
Ms. Crowell, anything further based on the jurors' questions? Mr. Anderson, anything?
You testified a lot about consent, but you did not comply with the policy except through Charlotte Laporte, correct?
Correction, asked and answered.
It's predicate.
Overruled.
No, I'm
All
not
right.
sure what you're asking.
Is Dr. Danielson on the risk committee?
I don't know that.
All right. Afterwards, did you document all of the things you testified to in the record?
Objection made.
Overruled.
I don't know what you're asking.
would it refresh your recollection to see how you documented what you did with Maya in an email, a memo you sent around immediately after?
Sure.
You pull it up.
Yes, what's
It's
the
in evidence. It's 100294, and the second page is 95. No, that's not it. It's 194 and 195. There you go.
put up 9-4.
Now, let's bring the second one up if we can. Take a look at these now. And first tell me, was this your documentation of what you did after you did it?
Just the date of this one. That's blah.
Where in here does it explain anything of what you said you did?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, you don't say in here that you obtained consent from risk management, does it?
I'm not sure I would obtain consent from risk management.
Does it say that you got any consent from anyone?
I'd have to look at my emails from that day too.
Did you bring those emails?
No.
Would you agree with me that if you had done all the things you said you did, it would appear in here more likely than anywhere?
I can't say that it would.
Well, then why did you do it?
I don't understand your question, Mr. Anderson. Let's not use so many pronouns.
Yes, sir. Then who took this information?
Objection, vague.
This is as to 1002-1094.
Objection, vague.
I'm just talking about the whole thing.
Why don't you be more specific with your questions?
All right. In this exhibit, 1002-0194, in the middle, it says actions taken or intervention completed. Do you see that?
That wasn't my note.
I see. And so where would the person putting this down get this information,
Objection, vague.
Sustained.
if not you? Who else could give this information? The entire thing.
Sustained.
Objection, vague. I'm asking.
It says here that Maya reports she would like to pray. Do you see that?
The note that's up on mine is my note, and I don't see that.
It's in the middle right there. It says she left the room moaning, bending at the hip, using her legs to move. See that?
I do see that.
That was not testified to in direct examination, was it?
No.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Crowell, anything further?
Just briefly. So the record you just looked at,
0995 established that you took the pictures before she left. Uncle Scott was taking her, and you took the pictures when she came back.
Right.
Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Anderson?
From that question,
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Members of the jury, anything else? Looks like I've got At least one more question coming. Ms. Beedy, should the documentation of obtaining consent be part of a medical record for any procedure done on a patient?
It can be, and yes, it can be part of the medical record. And we would, if when we get consent, we would have put it in the chart. But it's a different form, and it might be in another part of the chart.
Anything else?
No,
Anything else?
But you have no idea where that is, correct?
Oh, I know, it would be under consents. There's always a consents tab within the chart.
Anything further from the jury? Okay, members of the jury, I think this is probably a good time to break for lunch. Have them back to go at 1:40. Do not discuss this case amongst yourselves. Do not do any investigation and receive no information.